Hi there, class. Welcome to our first screencast-o-matic. Actually, this is our second one because I did a little demo using the whiteboard. But for this screencast-o-matic lesson, I'm going to lay out the steps leading into your research and then drafting of your paper. There are about 10 steps that you need to take before you even draft the very first draft of this paper. But you'll see that by laying this out, by giving you the visual, it will help you think about how you're starting the project so that you're not going to sit at your desk thinking, well, how am I going to start writing about this? You'll have a lot of work done even before you get there. So the first thing, after you have read the assignment, make sure that you read it, annotate it if you need to so that you understand what I'm asking for. Choose one of the options for how you're working with your texts. And then you need to choose your texts. That means you need to select the two texts that you are working on. Now, one of those texts must be a graphic novel, and the second one can be a second graphic novel, which is really the easiest choice, the simplest. But you may also choose film, television, video games. I've had students work on those. So you can be creative. I do not recommend that you choose a full novel, a regular prose novel for the second text. So this is going to sound completely ridiculous, but step 1A is to read your two texts and then also annotate them. Read and annotate both texts, whatever they are. And again, I'm using the word text to include film and video, television. So you must annotate these, take notes. These notes will help you develop the next part. So annotate them. Now, when you're annotating, what exactly are you looking for? I should have put this as number 2 actually. So let me just do that. Read and annotate. And then 2A is look for patterns. What I mean by look for patterns specifically, so there's this thing called the method. And if you had me for English 101, this will sound quite familiar. We read a text called Writing Analytically, and this comes directly from that. So in addition to annotating things about the story, things about rhetorical choices, I want you to specifically look for patterns. This is quite important. So what do I mean by that? Well, you're looking for things that are patterns of things that are exactly the same, things that are similar or related, binaries, and then anomalies. So what I mean by that, things that are exactly the same. For example, things that repeat exactly. So if there are words that come up over and over again, if there are images that are exactly repeated, those are things that you want to make note of because the creators are putting those there for a particular reason. So make note of that. Things that are similar or related would be things that are not exactly the same, but they create what is called a string, meaning that they're related somehow and they're put together for a reason. So, for example, if you have a pattern of panels in a particular comic that repeat, so they're not exactly the same, but they create a string of relationships that is notable. You happen to notice that, oh, well, it seems like we always have a zombie and a tomb and a skull. Those come up over and over again. So they're not exactly the same, but they're definitely related. To use maybe a Days of the Dead example for number 1 on this, exactly the same, and which could also be a string actually now that I'm thinking about it, but we see a lot of crosses, right? So we see a cross on Diego's forehead, we see crosses in the graveyards, we see crosses here and there. We see a cross on the cover of Days of the Dead. So that would be either an exact repetition or a string. So those are two things that you want to make note of. The next one is what we call binaries. And in this sense, when we talk about binaries, what we mean are opposites, exact opposites or very close opposites. So for example, black and white. So let me put opposites here. So things like black versus white, on versus off. If you were to think of a room, you turn the light on, you have it off. Those are exact opposites. So they're not things that are related, like someone in one of my sections said, oh, like peanut butter and jelly. No, that would be a string, right? Peanut butter and jelly are not the same thing, but they're related. We put them together. That would be something that is similar or related, but binaries are opposing things. And then the last one, the last kind of pattern that you want to keep an eye out for are anomalies. And these are things that are strange, weird, or they stand out somehow. So for example, if you think of a film, in a film, an anomaly would be something like, well, the scenes are mostly in black and white, but then all of a sudden you have a character running across the screen wearing red. And so that one thing stands out. Anomalies are the things that make you go, well, that's really weird. Why is that happening? So look for patterns. That's the kind of annotation you want to perform in this particular instance. Okay, so number 3 is to create a list of search terms or vocabulary. So for this one, the vocabulary that you're creating, the vocabulary that's coming up as you're annotating, those will become your search terms. So in order to make these useful, you need to create a list. Create a list of your vocabulary. Step number 4 is to free write. And what we mean here by free write, I want you to write for 30 minutes. So I want you to just sit down somewhere when you have 30 minutes, steal 30 minutes from somewhere, wherever you need to go, and just sit down and write about your texts separately. You can either write about them separately or you can write about them together. I actually skipped a step. I'm going to go back up here for a second. There is a number 5 up here, and that is to ask the question. I have to go back up here. Ask the question, so what? Why do these things matter? Now, don't forget the so what, because after you take all of these notes, then you want to pause for a moment to think about, what do these patterns mean? Why are they put together in these ways? And the other thing I want to note is that you do this looking for patterns for each individual text. Do not put the text together yet. You're thinking about them as separate entities, and then later you'll put them together in your thought process. So look for patterns for text number 1, and then look for patterns for text number 2. So then we jump back here to free writing. This is where you're starting to think about how these go together. And just keep writing for 30 minutes. Do not stop. Let your mind just jump all over the place for 30 solid minutes. And then number 5 is to revise the vocabulary, otherwise known as your search terms. So now that you've done free writing, what is it that you come up with? What are you thinking about in terms of new vocabulary? And you'll see that if you do this, you will come up with new ideas. So number 6, now you start your research. And you can do this by going to things like Google Scholar, or you can go to the library MJC library site, and that is linked in the module for you. And what you're looking for, you're using academic databases. JSTOR, for example, is an excellent one. Or, as I said, Google Scholar, which is up there. I'm just going to put that in bold. Do not use regular Google because you will not find scholarly sources. And what I want you to do for this, because it's not possible for me to demonstrate how exactly to do this, how to search through the databases and such. I guess it is possible, but that's already done for you on the library's website. If you go to MJC's Library and Learning Center website, they have a ton of videos and a ton of demos on how to do this in a way that makes sense. So number 7 is to compile your sources. So what that means is you are going to look for about 10 scholarly sources. And at this point, you won't necessarily know for sure that they're scholarly, but if it's from a journal, if it's from a reputable academic journal kind of thing, then it's going to be helpful for you. But you're not testing it yet, you're just kind of looking for those resources. And then the next step is to evaluate. Evaluate those sources using CRAP test, for example, and that's just to review the credibility, authority. You're looking at who wrote it, where is it coming from, a university, that sort of thing. Do not use things like People Magazine, do not use Psychology Today. All of those are not considered scholarly. Newspaper articles are not scholarly. You want stuff that is written that is specifically peer-reviewed. That's important. Okay, and then step number 9 is to annotate your sources. So that means take notes. Read the abstract. The abstract is just that little summary. A really big tip here on sources is if you find one excellent source, look to the back of that source and you'll find a list of more sources. You'll find a list of their works cited or their resources, and you can look through there and see, hey, maybe there's something in addition that I might find useful for this project, and then you can move along and use that find it through the MJC website and then use that for your own purposes. And then step number 10, finally, is to draft. Draft your first draft. We'll just repeat the word draft. This is not concise, by the way. Don't do as I do. Draft your first, let's change that, that's bothering me. Draft your first version of your paper. So, in summary, there are all of these steps that you need to take. Now, some of them will go by super fast. Like, you can get all of these done 1 through 4. You can get those done in a couple of hours, if that. I mean, it goes really fast. But you do need to give yourself time to go through all of these steps before you get to step 10. Do not just try to pick your text and then draft a paper. Certainly don't try to draft a paper without reading, right? So you need to do that. On the module are examples of different kinds of scholarly sources, so you can see what these look like. They take many different forms, but they have some telltale signs that they are indeed scholarly. So again, I want to encourage you, the Library and Learning Center at MJC is linked on the module. Please use that. Please watch the videos on how to determine scholarly sources, and there's an additional link from another university there. This is a super important module, so don't skip any of it. And I hope this was helpful for you. Thanks.